Hello and welcome back to the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. I am your host, Michael Stamatinos. Welcome. Great to have you here. And if you're new to us, we're super excited because we're having just some really great conversations, candid conversations with real leaders that are painstakingly reshaping the future of healthcare and care delivery. And we're happen to be passionate about a few different areas. We're passionate about healthcare innovation, about leadership, about access and the adoption of those innovations. And if it's your first time tuning in, let me just take a quick step back here and just give you a little bit more of the rundown of what we're trying to get done here. So our focus is on bringing real stories of innovation to life, not just the stuff that you see on the highlight reels, but real stuff, people that are really innovating and getting things done, and also talking about the wins and talking about their learning. So it's an opportunity for the guests to be able to share their story, all those things to our community, and ultimately with the world. And wherever you are, if you haven't checked out any of our historical interviews, please, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, hit the subscribe button now so that any of the new episodes come directly to you. Okay, so before we start in this episode, I just want to be very clear about something. This conversation today, despite this senior leader being a supply chain leader, is actually not about supply chain. It's actually about leadership. The part that people don't talk about, the quiet pressure, the long days, the weight of the responsibility that doesn't turn off. So my guest today is Regine Villain, the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Ochsner Health. Honestly, guys, she's so impressive. She leads one of the most complex operations in healthcare. Um, Her title is not the story. The story that we're going to share today is really around what it means to carry the weight of that responsibility for people, especially when things are uncertain. And if there's anything that we've seen over the last few years, things are very uncertain. So Regine has led through moments where the system kind of was held together, but she's also led through moments where things barely were held together. And I think what sets her apart from sort of our short relationship that we've since started out is she's not like a performative leader. She's super serious about the work that it takes behind the scenes and connecting with people and really leveling with them. So this conversation today is about the type of leadership that rarely gets named, um, and the discipline that it takes to stay steady, especially when others around you need you to keep moving forward. So my hope is that it's going to be just like our other conversations, which have been rigorously honest. And I'm grateful that she agreed and said yes to this. So Regine, it's great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Wow, Michael, listening to you, you certainly make me sound very, very impressive. And I'll remember
So
to
you
take
are.
you with me everywhere I go. I love it. So,
Well, we did record it, so you have it. It's good for you. You know, you could bring it in. Maybe we could use it as like a hype person, getting the crowd pumped up when you go in. Um,
I gotta tell
Before
you again, the alignment is amazing. In my head, I'm thinking the high person, and you said it. So,
All
yes.
right. So hey, so before we get into the work, like how are you really doing right now?
You know what? I'm doing great. I mean, it's a great time to be in leadership these days. It's a great time to be alive. And I am just really thankful and grateful
Mm,
for all of the things that have happened before that have made me the person that I am today. I
yeah.
walk around with joy and purpose. And you asking me this question lets me know that it's important really to lean on that because I think it's very interesting as you talked about all of the different things that happen in leadership, especially in the role that I am currently, and the role that I've really held in the last 30 years in healthcare. Supply chain is an area that is always fraught with pressure. And
Hmm.
so I'm doing well. Thank you so
No,
much
that's
for.
good. All right. So you mentioned about sort of your origin story, your background. What did the young Regine think success looked like?
Well, the young Regine who grew up in Haiti, so that's where I'm from, and that's why I did, my studies all the way through the equivalent of high school. Young Regine was driven from as long as I can remember. I was the kid who always stayed in her room, stayed back to study when other friends and other kids were playing outside. I wouldn't go play until I knew that I had taken care of whatever it is that I had taken care of. I was that kid who, at about 8 or 9 years old, during summer break, asked my mom to buy me a big whiteboard. At the time, they were green boards. I don't know if you remember seeing those, right? Green
Yeah,
board,
I
a
remember the
lot
green
of
chalkboards.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
green
chalkboards.
chalkboards. Yeah. And invited some of my friends over. And we basically stayed on top of our studies. And I was leading math school and I was leading grammar school in my house. So Regine was very driven. I was that nerd, very driven. And it translates today as well. But growing up, I always thought I was going to be a doctor, very specifically a
Interesting.
pediatrician.
Mm,
Pediatrician is what I've always said. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why is because growing up, my dad I used to hear my dad talk about the fact that, being in healthcare, being in medicine, being a
right.
doctor was
Hmm.
something very noble, and that he would be honored for any one of his children, to be in that profession. And so I bookmarked that, and in my mind, I said, okay, well, I'm going to be the one who's going to be the doctor. And I'm going to be the
Ah,
one who's go into healthcare because I was a daddy's girl, all the way through. So growing up, I wanted to be a pediatrician and I was convinced. So anything science, anything, especially around the human anatomy and all of that, I was fascinated with.
hmm,
I watched, I think, every show that had anything to do with, medical innovations and medical stuff, clinical stuff, even all the way down to some fairly gory things because I figured that if I'm going to be a doctor,
right.
I need to be ready for
Yeah,
that.
you gotta be
So,
comfortable in those situations.
yes,
Yeah,
I have to be comfortable. And so I probably knew things about the human anatomy at that time that most people or most kids my age didn't know because I was
yeah,
focused. I was
yeah.
laser focused on being a doctor and becoming a pediatrician. And then when it was time for me to graduate the equivalent of, because it's the European French system, so it's the
Hmm.
baccalaureate. So the equivalent of that last year, which would be my senior year, then there were lots of unrest that really were kicking up in Haiti.
Yeah,
And really going into the university was not very assured. And for me, being that nerd, I could not fathom not being able to go to school because of whatever unrest was going on. So
right.
I convinced my parents to leave Haiti and to go elsewhere. So I ended up in Puerto Rico. So in
Okay.
my mind, though, not having, I guess, educated myself enough, I thought that in order to become a doctor, I had to have all of my funding available at once and that I needed to be ready right away. And so I also did not want to be a financial burden on my parents.
Right.
So I said to myself, well, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to pay for med school. But the next best thing, which is that nerdy math, all math science person, then maybe I can go and I can be an engineer.
Okay.
So I decided that I was going to become an engineer, not necessarily letting go of that dream, but in my mind, I said, okay, let me at least be an engineer and then we'll figure it out.
So when you were younger though, did you like imagine yourself leading, or did leadership kind of just like find you?
No, I definitely knew I was going
Okay.
to be a leader. I saw myself leading, and everybody around me said the same thing as well. I told you, I took the initiative and told my mom to buy me a green chalkboard, the biggest that she could find. She installed it, and then I held classes in my home during summer break just to make sure that we kept our minds fresh and going into the next year. I was the math teacher. And then in school, throughout my years in high school, whenever teachers came, especially math and sciences, I was especially gifted in those. Teachers would come and they would sit in the back and say, Regine, you have the class today. You're going to teach today. So I've been put in positions where, because of the person that I am, because
Yeah.
of how focused I've always been, I've been afforded the opportunity to lead in instances where, now that I think back of it, it's like, wow, how did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like during school, when we had to do the Pledge of Allegiance and it had to be over the mic, and then we had to, sing for the anthem every morning. And I was picked as the person who was the voice. So I would go into the director's office and I was the voice, like talking about, pledging the allegiance and singing the hymn. When I
Mm.
was when I was in any audience and they needed a speaker, I was the one chosen. So I've been in that role. And
Yeah.
I always knew that I would continue to be in that role because I loved being in that role.
Did you feel pressure early on too? And what did you do with that pressure? Or how did you like get through it?
The pressure, definitely, but I think it was more self pressure.
Mm. Mm.
Pressure
Okay. Yeah.
to always be on point,
Mm.
pressure to always be, as elevated as possible, as polished as possible, pressure to just, connect,
Mm.
pressure to make sure that, I'm resonating, and that when I'm walking away or whatever interaction that I'm having, that it's a meaningful interaction. So it was really more self pressure than anything, but
Yeah.
that pressure was also my motivation.
Okay. And then when you kind of got through that initial early stage in your life and your career and you got into your professional kind of career into that ladder, yes, what leaders, I mean, who believed in you before you had like, proof, right? Like a track record, like who saw that in you? Maybe you can name them if you want, just to kind of give them a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. So the rest of that story is that when I went through, I became an engineer, went to the University of Florida, did my studies in industrial and systems engineering, started working as an engineer, in corrugated plants, and thought to myself, what am I doing here? And
Mm.
then fortuitously, and you know how I feel about that, God had a friend call me and
No.
said to me, I am a fellow at one of the largest hospitals in New York at the current time, and they are looking, and I heard them say they're looking for somebody with engineering background. I know you've always said you wanted to be in healthcare. Perhaps it's an opportunity for you. I just wanted to let you know. I just thought to myself, wow.
Mm.
I called, the rest was history. So I found myself in New York at a hospital, the closest that I was ever to that dream, that little girl who wanted to be a pediatrician, but not yet a pediatrician. But in a moment of clarity, I realized that making a difference in those people's lives that I've been studying for the past, 18, 19, 20 years, I've been doing it in a way where now my role can still allow me to make a difference
Yeah.
in their lives. So when I entered, this was a completely foreign world to me.
Yeah. Right.
And trying to navigate through, I found in one of the leaders who, interestingly enough, became my employee later in life, was just like amazing, how it went around. But
Wow. Full circle moment there. So
circle
wait a minute.
moment.
All right. So you get in there and you start to realize that, you know what? I'm going to be able to serve those that I wanted to be just like. So I get to impact them because they're now, in essence, um, in they're your customers, right? Those physicians, they're the clinicians, they're your customers. You serve them internally, they're your internal customer. And now, as you start to grow and scale, do you have a level of interaction with them on a day-to-day basis? What are those relationships like? What is that dynamic like? for you?
So again, remember, that's the little girl that's been curious, that's been thrown in a lot of, a lot of situations where she's fearless and she just thinks that the world is her oysters. And actually, that's what my dad used to tell me, my dad and
Mm,
my mom, that you know what, never let anybody define what next is for you, and never let somebody define where that ceiling is until you've reached that ceiling. So
mm,
basically, the sky's the limit. Both my parents told me that. So I walked it into a world that was foreign to me, but realizing at that moment that I could still make an impact in those people's lives that I have been
yeah.
passionately, preparing for. So I just found myself entering, I just walked into the CEO's office one day. Just this person walking in a CEO's office. I just said, "Do you have a minute?" And I never forgot. I'm reliving the moment now. The folks in that office, because it's an office suite like it always is,
Hmm.
walking in and just saying, "Hi, I need to see the CEO." It's just like, and so when I entered, finally, I think he was amused. And so he said, "Sure, come in. How can I help you, young lady?" And so I said who I was, and I said that I was very new in the organization, but that I didn't know anything in healthcare because, I went, did my studies and became an engineer, but I'm really, I've always loved healthcare. And I want to know what I need to do to be in your chair one day. That's what I told him.
Let's go.
Let's
Let's go.
go. So he was just absolutely tickled and said, "Wow, so who do you work with? Who do you work for here? Where did you come in?" And so he said, "You know
You're
what?
probably more impressed, like, how the hell did you get into my office?
I'm telling you, people who had been there for however many years, when I told them the story, it's
Yeah.
like, how did you even get there? I just walked and I'm like, you know what? And since it's been my motto, what's the worst that can happen? They say, no, sorry, you can't see him. Sorry, you can't be here. Sorry, you have to have an appointment. But what if there's a chance that they say, you know what? He has 20 minutes and is he available? Sure. Do you want to talk to her? Yeah. And that's what happens. So that happened. And then my leader at the time, Dave Tompkins, is the person who really encouraged me. He was an incredibly kind and supportive individual. Again, the way I'm framing this person who
Yeah.
comes in, doesn't know anything about healthcare, walking into CEO's office, asking questions that nobody dares to ask just because I felt like I was bold and brave. But just because for me, in order to be that best self, that best person that's going to ultimately serve those people that I was passionately looking at, I needed to know. And so, in order to know, in order to learn, you have to go to the people who know, who can tell you what to do. So,
Mm,
that was my compass. And Dave was an incredibly amazing leader whom I
mm,
never, who I never forgot, and I always credited for really grounding me and getting me to become the leader that I am today. And then when I fast forward just a few years later, when I went back to New York, I became part of an organization that acquired the hospital where Dave was the leader. And
yeah.
by that virtue, I became his leader.
Wow.
And it was an incredibly emotional and humble moment for me. And I credit him every single time that I had an opportunity at meetings, regardless of the fact that I was his leader. I never saw it that way because I
Mm,
always saw him as that person who was incredibly kind to me at the beginning of my career, who was just this open person who allowed me to ask all kinds of crazy questions into his office. Now, Dave was not the CEO, he was the leader of supply chain,
Yeah.
But as I progressed into it, and then I started to really go in and ask questions, wanted to know things, wanted to ask for more, hey, all right, I'm doing this, I'm bored now.
Yeah.
I learned this already. Can we do something else? Can you
It's kind of
help me?
like a game. It's like a game. You kind of continue to like, hey, I beat this level. Like, what else you got
That's
for me?
That's actually a very good way of saying it because that's exactly it. And so it's like, okay, I've beat this level and I've played it multiple times already. I feel like I already know where the bad guy is gonna jump in. I already have
Yeah.
my move
Yeah.
ready. So what else can we do? And so that's how with somebody like Dave, I was able to start to not only ground myself, really learn, because then again, like I said, I made the decision if I'm not going to be a pediatrician slash a doctor, then I'm going to be the best darn healthcare leader who can still make an impact in people's
That's right.
life. And so
So
I'm going
then,
to embrace it all. I'm going to learn. I'm going to ask questions. I don't care. I'm going to walk into rooms and I'm going to be charming. They're not going to be able to resist me. And I'm going to get answers.
so look, clearly you don't know how to take no for an answer, which is great. What, w- trying to be on that road to being a great healthcare leader, what part of leadership, like drains you the most?
Um, the part of leadership that I feel drains me the most is having to deal with people whose alignment are not correct, not only with themselves or organizations, because I'm a
Yeah.
people person. I lead through the lens of humanity, right? I
Yeah.
believe that without that whole self, you can't be your best.
That's right.
However, there are individuals that I've encountered during my career who almost have been like career, um, how do you call these folks? It's almost like they're obstacles, right? And so they made their careers being obstacles, but not in a way that is, like curious. I'm just trying to understand, so that's why maybe I'm in the way. But people who have been maliciously, obstacles and who have made it hard for people and who have not been kind. That to
Mm,
me drains me because you don't walk into a place where you spend 8, 9, 10 hours of your day and purposely try to poison the environment. To me, that was always very hard trying to figure out how do we either gain these people back or how to
yeah.
get these people to understand that perhaps this is not the thing for you because
Yeah.
obviously it's not for everyone because
Right.
healthcare is hard. Healthcare, regardless of where you are, when you work in healthcare, it's not easy. It's not just that kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's hard because it's human, right?
Yeah. So
Because
what
we're
about
not
then? What
talking
about
about
this?
systems.
So when you're talking about people draining, ones that are misaligned, trying to weed those bad apples out of an organization, because I do believe they can kill the spirit of an organization. Um, and leadership, people love talking about the highlight reels. Just like, hey, leadership, look how great this is. But what is like a bad leadership day look like for you? Someone that's in your seat. What's like a rough day look like?
I mean, I think for me, a rough day is a day where, well, I mean, we're going to start with the obvious, where it feels like nothing is working, right? And by that, I mean, you may start the day with something like a disruption that is very sensitive to the operation because you know that, wait a minute, let's just use something like, oxygen tanks, for example. We know that in order to sustain life, especially in certain cases, you need to have oxygen, right? I'm
Yeah.
using that
Yeah.
example. So you walk into a situation where you start your day where there's an issue with that. And so that almost like starts to get you, oh my goodness, wow, I need to figure out how we find our way to really resolving this issue. And then usually you have that. And what
Does
what
that get escalated to you right away? Because presumably there's others on your team, like when does that get escalated to you? Like how bad does it have to get before it comes to you?
Well, something like this in the example that I gave, I would be involved in this almost right away because
Okay.
the implications are far and wide. But you're absolutely correct that there are people on the team who are absolutely the most appropriate and very diligent in taking care of that. But something like that, because of what it carries, there's definitely a likelihood that they're going to involve me right away. Not only because of that, but because I've always positioned myself as well as the person that brings the outside in. I'm the person who brought a lot of the outside relationships, a lot of those conversations with vendors. So perhaps it's in a bid to say, hey, Regine, we may have an issue. And then maybe then I can activate my relationship either with an alternative, vendor by saying, hey,
Mm,
you know what? I know we don't have, because it's happened. I know we don't have a relationship with you, but I'm wondering if you can help me. And just based on the fact that you have a relationship, a long-standing relationship with that person or that
yeah.
organization,
Yeah.
sometimes it works, right? So
Mm,
for me, that can start a day. And then when you also have, again, it always goes around the people who are obstacles. And for me, there are people not only on your team, but there are people around the organization that become obstacles
yeah.
as well. And so that to me is draining because, especially in the frame that I'm using right now, there's a sense of urgency that you want to move from A to B to C so that you can really get to a place where you're sure that the issue is going to be taken care of. Because
Right.
again, at
Right.
the center of everything that I do, I want to make sure that my patients, and I call them my patients because that's what really connects me to purpose. They're my
That's
patients.
right.
I want to make sure that my patients are okay. I want to make sure that my physicians, my nurses, my clinical folks, whoever they are, have what they need in order to take care of that patient. So it's that balance of resiliency without martyrdom, because a lot of time as well, you have the resiliency and it means absorbing more pressure, right?
Mm,
So you start absorbing that pressure, and it's trying to figure out how you build the systems and the people and the processes around that don't just require the heroics to function. And so, in that, you're trying to maneuver through something like that, trying to maneuver through the levels, the many levels of obstacles that usually come your way, whether it's
right.
from somebody who doesn't understand or somebody who just wants to be, an obstructionist. And then,
Right.
usually, as I'm looking at a scenario like that, something like this would absolutely drain me and really, really get me almost depleted by the end of the day, where I would have to
Uh,
go and recharge myself.
as you start to as you climb the organization, right, and you get to bigger seats, bigger chairs, more responsibility, more pressure, more expectations, naturally, when you're kind and you're generous, you like to say yes to things, but inadvertently, when you say yes to too many things, you end up saying no to some very important things. What do you say no to now that you used to say yes to?
Wow, it's as if you know me because I I have a hard time saying no. Um,
Yeah, I'm a recovering people pleaser.
yeah,
I got it. I got you.
yeah, the people pleaser part of me is definitely one thing, but also the notion that in my head, you know what, I have to just take care of it. I just have to get it over with, take care of it and do it. Or somebody asks me something, you just want to be that person who's always, seen as being flexible, collegial, all of
Yeah.
those things, friendly and all of that. But inevitably what happens is really it depletes you as well. Right.
Mm,
That is really not leadership. And I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the last article that I published on LinkedIn. I actually talked about that when I talked about things that I'm going to let go this year. And this is one of them, right? That I've been
mm,
intentionally working through, learning to say no when it's appropriate. There are things that, especially things that require a lot of you and a lot of your energy.
yeah.
I'm more into that energy protection season, right? let's protect my energy so that I can deploy it where it's really the most needed and the most necessary. So, for example, people get involved in their little, I don't know, squabbles and stuff, and I don't want to get involved into it. Do you want to go to this conference and this conference and that conference and this conference? I can't go to five conferences at the same time. I can't split myself in five.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
in the past, the need and the desire to not only be on the forefront of what's going on, but be seen as this person who's, always there, always, again, that collegial person. It's like, wait a minute, then I'm going from conference to conference, I'm splitting myself in five. I come back, I'm just exhausted,
Yeah, you're
and I
rocked.
still
Yeah.
have 50 things that I have to take care of. And so it's just like you just have to learn, even when people ask you to participate, people ask you to do, I mean, I want to say yes. And so I am still in the recovery phases. I can't quite say that I am a recovering people pleaser like
Right.
you are, but I have
So
definitely
what's
learned
the
to recognize.
what is the matrix? What is the matrix that like people go through in order for you to say decisive yes or hey, it's a no because X, Y, and Z? Do you have like a framework that you use? I'm just thinking
Well,
about this for other rising leaders. What are some things that they can kind of use, incorporate, implement into their day-to-days? So if they're grappling with saying no, somebody who's going through it, maybe share that.
yeah, I mean, for me, it's like you start asking yourself this question, how is this, meeting the purpose that I've set for myself, right? The goal
Mm,
that I've set for myself, whatever that goal is. And so, does this really fulfill the mission? And if the answer is kind of like, well, not really, then perhaps it's a pass, right? Even if you put it in a parking lot, but it's not a yes. Right. And for me, at least, I know that once I move it to the parking lot, it's likely going to be a no because I would have already
hmm
said yes. Right. And
Yeah.
so you have to force yourself to ask the question, how is this fulfilling my purpose, the purpose of the organization, what I've set out for myself as a goal? And, all of those questions, you have to like be real with yourself. And of course, you're asking yourself that question. So you must be real to yourself as well, because if not, then that's another issue, right? And
Yeah.
so once you really think about this and say, well, does this really fulfill it? Is this necessary? And the answer is not a clear, resounding yes, then
Yeah.
it's likely going to be a no. And so
Hmm.
you have to learn to just like, it's not quantity, it's quality.
Right. Absolutely. Because look, there's everyone that's just vying for your time. They see a title,
Absolutely.
they vie for your time.
Yep,
I'm
absolutely.
curious, as you started to kind of throughout your career, presumably there's been a lot of I'll call them, tours of duty. And throughout some of those tours of duty, there's been maybe some memorable mistakes slash lessons. I mean, is there a story that you can share, maybe a mistake that maybe taught you the most, maybe took you the longest to even forgive yourself if it did happen?
Um, when I think about stories where I feel like I just want to bury my head. A lot of them are stories around making decisions without necessarily fully involving all stakeholders.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then finding yourself in a situation where it's like, oh my goodness, how could I have gotten that far and not thought this through? Right? Almost like a little bit of the version of egg on your face
Hmm.
when even though it's coming with good intention, but having done some things and making decisions like far along without involving all the right folks, and then finding those people being very upset or very disappointed in the
Yeah.
fact that some decisions have been made or that we are at the point of a decision without having had their input. And again, I talk about being an empath, that person in me that wants to absorb, people's emotions and stuff, that almost immediately, affects me because I
Yeah.
don't like. I don't like to be in a position where I feel like I've disappointed people,
Mm,
intentionally or unintentionally. And so I take that very hard and I take
mm,
it to heart. But I've learned that obviously, there's no perfection, no one is perfect.
that's right.
And I've learned that when you are your authentic self, even in those moments, and you acknowledge the faults, you acknowledge the gaps, you acknowledge what could have been done a little bit differently, um, I find that, it goes a long way and it really
Totally.
helps cure the ills that, maybe one has created. Like if I've created something, then I know that I need to like be brave and
Yeah.
go and admit to whatever it is and just say, listen, I'm really sorry that it got to that point, but just know that it wasn't my intention. But in that case, intention is not really what matters,
Hmm.
right? And so I've had a few of those, but then I also think about the other side of it where I've been in situations where I've felt um, miserable because being in a situation where um, leaders were not very respectful, right?
Mm,
Openly in rooms and in environments where the lack of respect for people, not necessarily me, but the lack of respect general for people, the some of the crassness of some of the comments made,
yeah.
I found myself really thinking and projecting myself in this environment, saying, if I can be in this environment, and if even if I look like I'm okay in an environment like this, I think it also says that I agree with that. And internally, that really,
Yeah.
really, 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 really almost like made me ill.
Yeah. It's not what you, I mean, leadership culture, it's not what you say, it's what you tolerate. So,
Yeah.
if somebody's behaving that way and it's like you're not saying anything about it, you're just as guilty in that sense. Um, that's that's interesting to sort of hear that. There's a few things that you mentioned in an earlier conversation off camera around just kind of managing by walking around and kind of getting a pulse on things. How important do you think that is from a visibility standpoint that your team sees you out there with them, where you're conversing with them? Can you maybe share a little bit more about that? And do you feel like as you've risen through the ranks, has that sort of been a staple that has been throughout your sort of leadership mantra?
As a leader, um, what gives me the most joy and what gives me the most fulfillment is to be able to spend time with the folks that are part of my team, but specifically so the people who are considered entry level, in the organization, the people that are most often unseen. Where
Mm,
I have had the most fulfilling time as a leader is when I've walked a mile or two in their shoes, literally,
hmm.
where I have gone into an OR and donned, the proper PPEs to enter into the OR, sitting on the floor, counting the widgets, inventorying with them, and helping them to put away whatever the stock is at the moment and asking them, questions about things that they see that could be done differently. Because frankly, let's not kid ourselves. We sit in the boardrooms or we sit in those beautiful conference rooms in the corporate offices, and we're coming up with a lot of ideas about what we need to do differently, how we need to improve XYZ, how we need to
Yeah.
optimize XYZ. But often we don't think to ask the people who are really part of it. And that's
Mm,
where, for me, the deference to expertise is something that I really say a lot. And I've said it too many times to be
mm,
counted that the deference to expertise is something that we must abide by, even as leaders, because my
mm.
title does not equal expertise. My title is just that. But if I'm looking at optimizing the operations on the loading dock, I cannot possibly do it without making sure that the expert
Hmm.
On that loading dock is part of that conversation. In that conversation, in that moment, in that realm, they are the experts. And often leaders forget that expertise is not title.
That's probably very quotable. Expertise is not title. That's a that's a writer downer.
I'm gonna remember that one.
Yeah, expertise
So,
is not
so
title. I'm databasing that for sure.
yeah, so it's really important. It's important that we take the time to go and talk to the folks. And I'm saying that it makes the most difference when you're talking to the people who are often unseen within the
Yeah.
organization. Right?
Well,
I'm
what do
not
you?
talking to the people who are, let's say, even direct reports. Those are still people who are considered senior leaders in the organization. They have a position of privilege in the organization. We're not talking about that. We're talking about that person who is trying to figure out, okay, what is my purpose today? Why am I here on this loading dock? This is now the second or third truck in the last 30 minutes that has come in here. And I'm just by myself unloading all these boxes and trying to figure out exactly what to do. Where's my purpose? So it's really important to keep that purpose. And the other thing that I say a lot, especially when I go and talk to those folks that are on the loading dock, that are in that, inventory room, getting them to understand that it's not just a box. And I just wrote an
Yeah.
article about that, and that I'm going to be publishing too. It's not just a box because inside that box is a life-saving device, right? Until you connect to that purpose and stop seeing it as just a box that is filling up your loading dock, that is driving you crazy because you're surrounded by boxes. But when you realize that if you had x-ray vision and you could see that this box had a pacemaker inside of it,
Right.
right? A pacemaker that a grandmother is being prepped for in surgery that is going to allow her to spend time with her first grandbaby. That is purpose.
That's right. That's right.
And
I love this. It's not just a box. By the way, that's probably a book title. So just you said it here, so you own that. You
yeah,
talked to a number
actually,
of.
the article came out, and I'm trademarking that too.
Listen, we're putting all those in the description of this so people can read them and have access to those assets and those articles. I'm because you're so collaborative in nature, when you probably talk to a lot of other health system leaders throughout the country. What's like one thing that you wish like other health systems leaders talked about more like openly?
Uh, I mean, I think, are you saying generally or around the role that I have?
It can be any way that you want to take it. It's your episode.
Okay. Well, no, I just think that I'm gonna go around culture because
Yeah.
where I found myself feeling a little bit misaligned sometimes is around culture of organizations
Mm,
and not necessarily completely either being fully realized or fully aligned. And I would tell leaders that if you're gonna go on a limb and make it a big to do about
hmm.
certain leadership principles or certain cultural qualities that you want the organization to aspire to, you really have to go all in. You got to go all in, and it can't just be surface level, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I wish that because it's the thing that they say all the time culture, eat strategy for breakfast every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so true because all the things that we've been talking about, whether it's this wonderful person, whether it's the wonderful, things that we've done, when you're inside an ecosystem where you also have cultural misalignment and the culture of the organization does not quite resonate, I think it creates, misalignments, disengagements throughout that permeates. and that show themselves up in different ways. And
Yeah.
so would really encourage leaders to think hard and fast about how they are talking about the culture and what they're doing to really emulate those words that are being said and the beautiful PowerPoint slides that are usually presented.
Yeah. Before we kind of go to wrap, I just want people to know, like, how do they follow your work? Because clearly you know, you present, you go all over the country, you do things, but how do they follow you and the things that you kind of stand for, the organization? Maybe we just kind of give you the mic here for a moment or so, for you to just sort of share that where people can hear more of you.
Well, thank you for that. And this is absolutely the time where I am defining that. But I would say you can start with LinkedIn because I am really truly fully uh, expending the work and the activities that I have on LinkedIn. This is where I've been amplifying my voice, more and
Mm.
more in the past few months, and I intend to continue to do that. There are a few other projects that I'm working on right now that will also come out on LinkedIn, that I'll,
Great.
I'll I'll talk about on LinkedIn and I'll reveal at the right time. But I would say LinkedIn is really the place where I want to continue to build that brand and continue to make sure that also, I talk about the word grounded. It's really important for me to feel grounded.
Yeah.
So this is a season of alignment for me. And, I'm really trying to use what I've learned, and that's both successes and scars alike, to really find my way to scale beyond just a single entity and
Hmm.
create what I consider my full realized purpose,
Mm.
which is to be a beacon of light, a beacon of optimism, and and also that innovative, that bold leader who does not take no for an answer, who does not know how to say no, but who does not take
Yeah.
no for an answer, right?
Yeah.
For me, when I hear no, I flip it around and I say, you know what, it's on. So
I love
that's
that.
another third one. You got a third
Hey,
one at
hey,
least.
you're on a roll right now, so it's like I don't even want to just want to keep it going. So look, let's just say you're talking to your younger self, you know, 20 plus years ago. Maybe it's a regime that doesn't have the type of leadership inner game that you had. And maybe it's someone that's quietly struggling with their leadership. And they're in an important role. What do you say to them? What do you want them to hear? I think that's probably what we leave off with.
Well, I think it's important for them to know that if they are already in a position that is important, that they need to remember that being in that position, they've gotten there because of whatever it is that they've been able to do. And so you need to carry that confidence with yourself in every conversation, in every room that you're walking in. I
Mm,
mean, this I'm thinking very specifically, most specifically for women leaders, because women, especially young women, generally tend to look at themselves, in a room, in a role, and not necessarily feel very confident. I can say that as a woman, even though I don't lead as a woman, like I don't walk into a room as saying I'm a woman leader, but
so
especially
you're a
so
leader.
women, that's right, I'm a
Yeah.
leader. Remember that you're commending your knowledge, you're commending the room, you're commending
Hmm.
the table that you're on, and you belong just like anybody else. Because if you're already in a place where you have the title, just based on what you've talked about, and you've already started to make some inroads, just remember to just dig in and remember that you are part of this conversation for a reason and that you belong there as much as anybody else.
I love that. This has been, we're probably going to have more episodes of you coming on because it's a lot of fun. But you know, if you're listening to this, actually, before we wrap, I want to say this. Leadership doesn't just look like a moment on stage or a highlight reel. It's like a lot of quiet decisions, it's long days, it's choosing to do hard versus doing easy. You don't necessarily, there's a difference between being nice and being kind, and you can still have really high standards and still be kind. And I think what you shared today wasn't necessarily what you shared, it was the mannerisms in which how you shared it, how you articulated it with stories, and it just grounded it. Quite frankly, there was a lot of golden nuggets that came from it. So I think it's if there's a few takeaways from this, it's like you're not an expert just because you have a title. I think that's like huge. It's more than just what's in the box. That's another huge one. And I honestly, Regine, I just thank you for your candor. I knew that you were going to be candid going into this, but like it was really nice. And for you to just show up and with a level of humility that really goes a long way. So for those that have been listening, if you're listening to this and you found it extremely helpful, please share it, like it, comment on it. Let us know what you felt was, something that stood out to you. And if there is a topic that you want us to explore, or if there's a leader that you want to come onto the show, let us know. We do read the comments. We want to make sure that we continue to bring a number of wonderful people onto the show that can add a lot of value to the community because it's not just about content, it is about a community. So thank you for listening and keep building with purpose, keep staying aligned, and we'll see you next time on the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. Thanks, Regine.
Thank you, Michael. This has been an absolute pleasure, and it was a point of privilege to be able to come on your show as well. Having met you not so long ago, but feeling absolute alignment with you. And I definitely enjoyed it. And as you mentioned, those of you who want to connect with me, you can do so on LinkedIn. And I know I referenced a couple of articles, and we'll make sure that you have access to those as well. And I'm here at your service, right? I don't have it all figured out, but with the help with people like Michael and others out there, we're building that community. And again, it's a privilege to be part of it. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.